Welcome to another episode of Ask the Zamboni Experts. I'm your host, Doug Peters from the Zamboni Company. Our guest today, Bob Vohnoutka, who's the Arena Services Manager for Athletica Sports Systems, and Bruce Irving, who is the VP of NHL Sales and Research and Development. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
It's great to see a couple of the fellow dinosaurs in the industry.
There seems to be quite a few of us lately.
Yeah.
Well, we're slowly dying off, but I'm glad to see that you guys are hanging in there.
Yeah.
Going extinct, I think, is the word, huh?
Could be. Bob and Bruce, could you guys take a couple minutes and share with us about your families, present day and when you were young, which was only a couple of years ago, and where both of you guys grew up?
Bruce?
I'll go ahead. I grew up in the Toronto area, the greater Toronto area, and spent most of my life there till about 12 years of age, and then I headed up. My uncles looked after me and started in farming business and ranching, racehorses, thoroughbred racehorses. And we moved out west to British Columbia, where same thing, was into farming, looking after cattle, horses, and I did a lot of rodeo out there, and came back to Ontario in my later years and got busted up in a rodeo and started my carpentry and welding career from there. So that's kind of how I've moved around a little bit in Canada.
Great. So I know somebody who can give me tips on betting the ponies.
Yes.
I'll expect a tip sheet for this weekend. I've got my account with Twin Spires all lined up, and I'm looking for some superfecta and trifecta stuff.
Okay.
How about you, Bobby? I think you're a native of Minnesota like I am.
You're right, Doug. I grew up south of Minneapolis, about 30 miles in a small farming community. My family, if you will, or my grandparents ran a business in downtown New Prague, which was the location, for about 40 years. So growing up, I spent a fair bit of time working in various aspects of that business. And then eventually moved to Minneapolis to go to trade school, which eventually is, maybe jumping ahead, but how we got into the rink business is as a result of that.
Well, I was thinking it might be New Prague, being that hockey hotbed that it is, that might have landed you in this business.
Actually, it's funny you say that. A little anecdote on that side, right? Graduating, going to school and graduating, we did. There was no indoor ice arena. We just had the mill pond to skate at. And reality was the rink attendant would actually kick you off the ice sheet if you brought hockey sticks or hockey skates or pucks, because you'd be injuring the pleasure skaters out there. So there basically was no hockey back, in the 70s when I grew up down in New Prague. So obviously they got their ice arena in later years.
I think it's probably one of those things that better known for some baseball, and one of the writers for the local papers, Mr. Royce, is always talking about baseball down in that part of the state.
Exactly. Yeah. Baseball is certainly probably number one, or at least co-shared with football, right? They had a pretty good high school football program for a while. So that's what they're most proud of.
Bruce, could you tell our listeners a bit about your career path? You talked a little bit about welding and carpentry and such, but what is it that branched you out into the ice rink world?
I was up north, and I ran a business up north in a recession hit. I was building custom homes and renovating old houses. And during the recession, I just came back down the city, helped my mom out. She was just going through a rough bit. And I answered a job at unemployment place. And in there was just looking for a welder carpenter, which I was. So I showed up on site. And in those days, we did what was called a built on site. And they just sent all the steel, all the plastic and everything. It just landed as raw material on site. And you just built a hockey rink and put it together. And I stood there and looked at this whole deal. And the greatest thing that attracted me to it was I was indoors. I wasn't getting rained on. No more snow issues. No more. So it was it was a 1 in a million shot, and I just jumped in with both feet and said, "There I am. Here I go." And been there ever since. Never looked back. That's my number one line to new guys starting in the industry too, is that I don't walk in dirty old mud holes and things like that as a carpenter would, and breaking up forms, carrying 120-pound forms up out of the dirt holes that I used to do and everything else. That here I'm on a concrete floor. It's nice and level. It's pretty clean, and it's good living. It's easy work, and away I go. So.
If only HGTV would have been around back in the day, you might have had your TV show before Tariq and all the people from Mississippi and all these other shows that are going on down there. You could have been the tallest flip-flopper of houses in the industry.
Yeah, yes.
The gal in Texas would have nothing on Bruce.
Bruce, do you remember the very first rink that you were out to that you put together a set of dasher boards on?
Oh, yeah.
And where would that be?
That was in Newmarket, Ontario.
Really?
So it's,
okay.
Yeah. Just around the corner from Jet Ice. And in those days, this is a funny one, is so we'd weld all the steel and we'd put anchor plates down every 4 feet with 4 anchors in it. Weld a steel post on that, weld steel stringers and everything. And when we actually were finished, my comment was, when the Zamboni driver hits these dasher boards, he will have a concussion. And that's how we looked at it back in those days. We have to build these things so they're indestructible. We thought nothing about player safety. There was none of that. It was just build these things so that Zamboni runs into it, that guy's got a concussion. So that's how we left them.
So that's going to lead me to a question that I joke around with customers. Do you guys really send commissions out to the resurfacer manufacturers, and maybe Marty Elliott gets a little kickback on every electric machine he sells? Because the electric machine's definitely heavier and is likely to win the battle with the dasher boards. Or is that just a rumor that might have been started down here in the States by some crazy sales guy?
It could be. We do send a box of beer and a case of whiskey to the monster truck runs. So we kind of put that out to the drivers real early. That seems to help out, especially when it's the off season for us in February and that. The monster trucks are number one in taking out stuff. So.
That's always good. It's like I've said, there's nothing wrong with a convenient fire if it destroys the right part of the building. Bobby, you and I go back a long ways, and I've seen you with multiple companies. How is it that you got your start? Maybe is your first job working for the Homestead Company in the rink industry, or was there one before that?
No, that was the first one. No, a good recall, Doug. Exactly right. I certainly enjoyed going back, with you and obviously your father back in Bloomington, and he was always a pleasure to work with and be able to visit with him about everything from what Dick Homestead was doing to what's going on in the baseball world, for sure. No, that was it. When I moved to the cities to go to trade school, it was a program called Environmental Systems Design. And the core of that program was refrigeration, air conditioning, and heating design. And after completion of that course I got hired right out of the course, if you will, by Homestead Ice Rinks. And so to that end, as you know, Homestead spawned a lot of the companies and the personnel out in the industry. And so to that end, originally I was hired because of the refrigeration background. And we had various roles at the time. Initially, started out with just doing layout, blueprints, drafting, if you will. We'd get a new rink contract and have to lay out the mains from the chiller room to the rink and/or the dashboard system. And then eventually gravitated to some arena services work, which even included doing some compressor rebuilds in the early years and changing shaft seals and springs and valves and things like that. The fortunate part was that didn't last real long, so I'd do that for a year or so, then the position would change. The one thing though that and that's really how I got into the dashboard business for the ice rink world, actually back in 1979 actually. The other thing that was sort of interesting is back at Homestead, because they were a relatively small staff, and all hands on deck, we'd have projects. So truly within 2 months of coming out of school and never playing hockey or really seeing much in the way of indoor ice rinks, I got put on a plane and sent to Long Island, New York to supervise a floor installation. And all I had to know was there are 256 pipes and they're 4 inches apart. And it didn't matter. We could be putting marshmallows through those pipes. It didn't matter as long as it made ice. That's all the customer had to know. It. We were going to make good ice for them. So a lot of good experiences that way.
Is that rink still around, Bobby, or is it gone by the wayside?
It was Nassau Coliseum at the
Really?
hangar there. I don't know if that's still there, but that was the one. That was the first one I had to deal with. Oh.
So you went to a trade school. Which trade school was that?
That used to be called Dunwoody Industrial Institute, and now they've changed their name, but still in existence. If you will, one of the big things, aside from the fact that you get an education, was that it was all about discipline and protocol, right? And because they wanted to prepare you for your working career, they actually did things like there was a time clock you actually had to punch in every day when you went to school. You had to punch in by 8 a.m. on your time card. You had to punch out at the end of the day. If you missed 6 days in 2 years, you were expelled. So the employers hiring out of there, which there was, like 200% placement rate, and that there were 2 jobs for every person graduating, they knew they were getting somebody who could tend to the requirements and were going to be dependable. So it was fortunate at that time, if you will.
It's no wonder you and my father got along so well, because that's where he had some schooling, as well as my uncle, and a buddy of mine's dad was from there. And I actually took some courses with Tommy from Troutwine from Augsburg down there. We took some night refrigeration courses, and there's also another guy that worked at Augsburg that I can't remember his name, but Tommy I remember because of his grappling career that he had on the side of work, besides being a Zamboni machine driver and working at Augsburg for JC down there, who was one of the crazier rink managers in the industry.
Wow, you bring back some names and some memories there, Doug.
Oh, it's part of being a dinosaur, Bob. It's a lot of stuff that's stuck in my head that I just can't get rid of, unfortunately. So, Bruce, you explained a little bit about why you had a hankering to get into the rink industry, not having to walk through mud holes, carrying forms and such. What else attracted you to the ice rink industry?
The company at the time, Crystoplex, there was a small group of people, and they were really, really friendly people, like amazing people to just get information from as I was learning this trade and this whole new way of building things. And then a fellow by the name of Dougie Moore, once I started in the installation part of it, the NHL was kind of building all the new barns, and we were trying to get things going real quick, and Dougie Moore was sort of their go-to guy. And I would meet him at all these new NHL buildings, and he'd take me out to lunch almost every time he'd see me and spend a half an hour just explaining how the industry worked and who were the players and who was this and things like that. And it was just the people, I would say, was the most important part of this whole deal, and still is today. My customers are most of the time are my best friends, just people I hang around with quite a bit. And those times when we get in tight times, they're the people I have the best laughs with too. So yeah, I would say people, absolutely.
Well, Dougie Moore is a great guy. He and my dad shared a lot in common, in guys that go back to taking care of NHL ice. And unfortunately, neither one of them are with us anymore to bounce things off of. But one name I want to throw at you is there was a motto that I think he used, and along with a few of my golf buddies out here in California. If it's free, it's for me. Does that sound like anybody you might have worked with at Athletica, or not at Athletica, at Crystoplex, that rings a bell for you, or do I need to give another clue?
That sounds like Doug Valance.
Well, I was. He's another character, but I was thinking more along the lines of Brian Townsend. And I'm going to guess that, that there might be a few stories that you could share of Mr. Townsend in his time.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Townsend, yeah, he's one of his kind. I have one on Doug that's a pretty priceless one. So it was every once in a while we'd have to go on the phone and start calling customers and say, hey, you're kind of late on the check. When do we expect to see it and things like that? And they would tell us, well, when we get the rest of the order or when it's finished. Things going back and forth, but we were chasing money. And Doug Valance, I remember him one day, his desk was right across from me, and he picks up the phone. He's talking to the customer. He says, John, just quit embarrassing yourself and send us a check.
Did you get the check?
Yeah, we got the check, right? Because Doug was the only one that could talk to somebody like that. You didn't take it as an insult. You just realized, okay, I'm in trouble now.
I can remember Mr. Townsend trying to convince some certain patrons of a bar out in Vancouver that I was an NHL player and a Washington Capital. And for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the guy. But I made a exit stage right real quick to get out of a situation that I saw was not going to go anywhere that would be beneficial to me. So, but some great characters in the industry. Bobby, how about you? What attracted you to the rink industry? You got your gig with Holmeston to start out with. You've stuck around for quite a while. I think you got more years in than I do. But what is it that attracted you to stay in the industry?
I think there's a combination of things. I think one was, like truly in some ways happenstance that I was able to end up at Holmeston where I did. And the great part of there was there were a lot of opportunities, and because they built the refrigeration systems and had the accessory department and the dashboard division, there are a lot of different, if you will, career paths or steps up the ladder within that. And so I was able to sort of had a lot of opportunities to grow, if you will, and take on more responsibility. And I think so because that seemed to work and was successful, provide opportunities. I certainly was satisfied in terms of the variety of the tasks I was responsible for, and of course, learning more things about the industry and learning all aspects of sort of the rink construction. So I think it was more along the lines of there were challenges all the time, which were personally satisfying to deal with and learn. And then the other part of it was because we were certainly building ice rinks, certainly across all 50 states, and of course some foreign work. Got to do a fair bit of traveling, right? And that always gave you a little variety instead of being in the office all the time. So it was those two things, and really then the last thing being, this is year 41, and in 41 years, the industry has always been there. The market's always been there. There's always been work opportunities within the industry, and that's pretty amazing. Granted, we just went through COVID, and that was probably the worst of the 41 years, was really probably last year, and for everybody involved in the rink industry. But there's always been business. When the economy gets tough, these facilities will need to be updated or at least kept safe or playable. And of course, when the economy turns around, you have a lot of new construction. So there always was demands for our services. So that was always, I think, the cool part. So sort of was a combination of those three things: interesting, challenging, consistent, and variety. Let alone, as you mentioned, all the different personalities. And that in itself is a whole nother, book of the folks that we've run into.
And was one of those interesting and challenging things the rink disaster or the rink master ice resurfacer, Bobby?
That was one of them. That was I wasn't directly involved, but being within the company, it was one of those I think business lessons you learn that sometimes you shouldn't let your ego get in the way, and there's smarter business decisions. But absolutely, that was part of it as well.
That was a unique piece of equipment back in the day.
Exactly. I hate to say it, but I know there were times that the supply chain seemed to fall apart for the axles and drivetrains. So I know that our purchasing manager from time to time would be trying to rummage around and even find stuff, I think, in salvage yards, trying to come up with units and equipment. So yeah, things are a little dicey from time to time.
Well, it was a happy day for us when Mr. Holmeston decided that maybe he would be better suited for being in the ice rink building world instead of the ice resurfacer building world.
Yeah, let's call it a day after Unit 50 or whatever it was, 45 or whatever, and yeah, think better of it.
Yep. Bruce, when did you know that this was going to be what you were going to spend your career doing, or the bulk of your business career?
It was early in the career, 95. Actually, it was Montreal Canadiens were opening up their new building, and we had some issues with some of an installer and a few sales reps that had gone into the building prior to that. And I got the call middle of the night, actually, from Pat Livingston, if I would be able to go and do the Montreal Canadiens install. And I was fairly new at it, and the system was a seamless glass system. It's probably the third one we had manufactured in our company. And being the green guy on the street, and I was happy. And once I got there, things really turned out to be in my favor, just the way it worked out with the personnel that were there, people that were there at the time. Even Francois Martindale, him and I are still great friends after that. It was a time when I was just sort of hung my hat up and said, hey, I installed the dasher boards at the Montreal Canadiens. Even did a film of me doing it, and that was the introduction for opening night. When I got home, I didn't even know it was going to be put on CBC, and it was. And people were phoning me up and saying, hey, I seen you on TV and things like that. And it was kind of a, here I am. And it was a big moment for me at that time.
So that was 95, you say?
Yep, 95.
So just a couple years after the last time a Canadian team's won the Stanley Cup.
Yep. Yeah.
But you had something to do with that success.
It's all just good-natured ribbing. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
I haven't started the 1967 chant yet, but that's in the background. And a certain compadre of mine that guaranteed that a team wearing blue and white with a maple leaf on the front of their jerseys was going to win the Stanley Cup this year. And I guess that that meme that's going around, I don't know if you've seen it, Bruce or Bob, but the meme with Phil Pritchard handing out the golf bag, which I guess has been the annual presentation to Leaf fans and players since 1967.
But appropriate, isn't
it? And Bob, how about you? When did you know? You've been in the industry for a while, but what was it that you said, okay, I'm going to stick through this? I'm sure there probably was an opportunity at some point in time to maybe go a different direction, but you've been a staple in the industry for so long.
Yeah, I think it got down once I got to, let me think here, about 15, 16 years into it. And through, you alluded to earlier, through the various corporate changes and acquisitions and all kinds of things, business experiences, there was a time that when we're going through some of those short-lived experiences that, maybe there's some other opportunities you should look at. But then you also realize that, so in my working world, I've got 15 years of experience of learning things that are beneficial in the ice rink or value to the ice rink market. And now you go outside to, let's say, just construction or any other market, and all of a sudden you don't have those 15 years on your resume, if you will. So it's like, I think really I've come to realize I've learned a lot, but I also have more value to this industry. And so it's on sort of probably a selfish basis, I think we'll just stay the course. Plus we enjoy it. I mean, I love working with the various people, and that's one of the best parts of the job is talking to people from all over the country on a regular basis. So I love that part of it. It's like, what, there's nothing wrong with what we're doing. Let's stay the course. And, the other thing too is, it's not like there's a trade school to go to dasher school. I mean, there is no such thing. So it is really, pull on your boots and get after it and, learn on the job, on the job training. So it was all good.
Well, and I think it's one of those things that when you develop the relationships that you have and Bruce has and that I have over the years with customers, you enjoy that. And I don't know if any job's going to be perfect 365 days out of the year, but I think we've all been pretty lucky in that we've been in an industry for a very long time, met some great people. I consider you guys to be some of my good friends of the industry, and it's fun just getting together, and it'd be nice when we can get together in person again and share a barley pop or whatever it is, and just chat again, like what we're doing right now. This is I enjoy this.
Yeah.
No, you're 100% right. It's not just business. It truly is. You feel like you're with friends most of the time in terms of the acquaintances.
Bob, you mentioned something about Homestead. Has there ever been a tabulation of how many offshoots there've been company-wise? I mean, the Joel Andersons and Chili Willy, the Premier Ice, Kurt Steinhauser. How many different companies were spun off of Homestead that became competitors?
Yeah, exactly. No, you hit on the head. I don't know. There's been not a necessarily formal list, but certainly a half a dozen long, I think, in terms of whether it's, the Becker Arena products and Jim Becker, or whether it's, Daryl Cox and Burley and Chris Banna and Davis Mechanical and I don't know if I mentioned Dale Anderson and the service department and those type of things. So absolutely, they certainly, it was the spawning ground for a lot of people in the industry for sure. And it was actually at the time, it was a great place to work. They were really phenomenal family to work for.
Well, I can remember an experience with the Homestead boys out in Caesar's Palace at a Japanese restaurant having teppanyaki, sushi, and some sake. That was a great experience. So shout out to any of the Homestead boys that are still around, Chuck, Alan, and the rest of the gang.
Yeah, and Bob, exactly.
Yep. Okay, gentlemen, you guys have had to travel a little bit in your careers. Bruce, why don't you kick it off with your worst traveling experience ever?
Oh, that'd be Australia back to Canada. So we were doing their Olympic Center there, and I was a single parent raising my little girl, and I kind of put the plug in the jug for 17 years. My little girl growing up and everything else, and I'm in Australia, and I met a guy by the name of Flanagan, good Irishman, and he insisted upon me having a drink with him one night. So from one drink, and then it led to another one, and then he proceeded to tell me about the bar he owned, and he wanted me to go to the bar with him. I said, once I finished the job and we're all done, he was also the contractor of the job. Every day at lunchtime, he'd come out and he'd slide out 2 24s of beer on the sheet of ice and say, 4 o'clock, boys, so let's get opened up. And then we'd all sit there and have a beer at the end of the job. But the last night I was there, beautiful, it was in Melbourne, Australia, beautiful city. So we go to this bar, it was fancy place downtown, and it was his, and his kids all ran it and everything else like that, beautiful place. But we decided to start drinking probably about 6 in the afternoon, and pretty much drink everything that he had in-house. So after that, I got in a cab and went back to the apartment I had rented, and the next day I'm flying out like at 6 a.m. in the morning, typical flight, and all the clothes I had on was just shorts and a nice light shirt. I just took them off and threw them in the washing machine, threw them in the dryer in the morning, got up, threw out my clothes, grabbed my bag, and was ready to go out the door. And I realized, uh-oh, where's my passport? Only to find it on the inside of the washing machine, stuck to the washing machine, soaking wet. So, and I am hungover, like bad hungover. I get to the airport. Now they're thinking I shouldn't be getting on the plane, not just because of my hangover, but because of my passport. And then they realized it was probably better to get me out of their country. So on the plane I went, and I missed the chance of going on first class. So now I'm back in coach. That trip all the way to New York was really, really rough, or to LA. And from LA, I did end up on first class, but I could barely get in my seat. The guy beside me was putting a blanket on me and tightening down my seatbelt. I was in such bad shape. It was had to be the worst flight to ever start drinking on, right? Like it's just one of those bad, it's just a bad deal.
Bobby, what about you?
It's probably nothing real major, but many years ago, back when I was at Homeston, is we got a contract through SMG to put the boards in Sheffield, England. So I had to go to Sheffield for a site measurement actually, and then also a sales call to the HOK office over there in London. So we did that. And at the time, this was, I guess, I don't know, back in late 80s probably. And I think it was about then or early 90s, somewhere in there. And back then, I had a Samsonite black suitcase. That's what I carried my tape measure and my tablets and my job folders and files with. And so obviously flew from here to Gatwick and then Sheffield and back maybe through New York or something. But in any case, every step of the way, whenever you'd get off the plane and go through security, they'd run you through, but I'd get pulled out and taken to the side for an extra pat down, an extra check, an extra interrogation. And it just happened at every single one. And I was like, what is going on? Why am I singled out? I thought I was a pretty normal citizen. Well, it turns out at the end, one of the guys advised that the reason I was getting all the extra attention is because of this black Samsonite, that there were a number of hijackings and plane bombings, and what was in common with them is they all had black Samsonites. So I happened to have the suitcase of choice for bombers, and so I got the special attention. So that one was just sort of like, okay, so there's a few things going on that you might not realize. So, and that was a good trip.
Bob the Unabomber Vohnoutka.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly, alias.
Gentlemen, I'm going to assume, and I've heard a little buzz in the air about careers coming closer to the end. What do you guys envision doing when you're done with your career of the ice rink world? Bobby, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Really, in no particular order, and certainly the task to be maybe further defined and developed. But for the most part, obviously, it's going to spend a fair bit of time, more time fishing and recreating, and if you will, biking. My wife and I enjoy biking, so more things along those lines. And then. I do like doing home projects, those types of things. So, got some deck work and some other projects for home. I like, I'm not one to sit in a chair and just sit in front of the TV the whole time. A little more traveling, that type of thing. At the moment, beyond that, I at some point wouldn't mind staying involved 2 to 3 days a week doing something somewhere of some magnitude. Worst cases, I've been thinking about heading back to New Prague and go take care of some ball fields or something. Just for fun and taking a few more ball games. So nothing necessarily work related. However, I won't necessarily close the door to that, but just other things and more of a laid back program.
Maybe one of these years we can get you to join our opening fishing group, and you can teach us a few things on Leech Lake. You're always welcome to be a part of that.
There you go. That may be a good possibility for sure.
Bruce, how about you?
I haven't given it much thought yet. I'm still got a few more years to go, and I'm just sitting back thinking of it's come up every once in a while, and I know I have to do something. I'm not a guy to just go home and say, okay, it's this kind of pandemic. I've done so much damage to my house and the lawn and everything else that I'm kind of sitting and going, this is pretty expensive. So if I do retire, I think I have to find something else to do.
Come on down here to California, and we can go to either Del Mar or Santa Anita, and you can just tell me which horse to bet on.
California's my favorite state. That'd probably be where I end up.
Well, come on down. We're bankrupt. We need your money. Even if it's Canadian money, it'll still spend down here. What experience have either of you had with driving a Zamboni machine? Bob, you may have driven a rink master. But
Exactly, Big Blue. No, you're 100% right. There was a 1-year period when about 81, 82, I was put in charge of arena services, and as part of that, I need to be familiar with the rink master. And so to that end, I had, I think, 1 or 2 driving lessons. I think it might have been down in Austin, maybe even, I think. And so I took a couple laps around the ice surface, and of course was told we, had to complete it in, I think, 7 to 8 minutes at that time. And I was able to stay off the boards. I didn't damage anything. The machine still ran. And then probably fortunately, a few months later, I ended up moving into the dasher department. And that was the end of my driving career. So one and done.
Did
But
we
never,
never get on a real ice resurfacer, a Zamboni machine?
no, never been on a Zamboni, never operated one. Only the Rink Master is the one and done experience.
Wow, we're gonna have to get you before the shoes get hung up. We're gonna have to get you on
Yeah,
the Zamboni machine.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Somebody with an old set of boards.
Well, no, well, you want to get them on a new set so that they maybe buy another set of boards.
Well, there's that. Yeah, okay.
Convenient fire.
That's right. That's right.
Bruce, how about you? Have you driven a Zamboni machine?
Other than to just move it out of my way in the back of the new building constructions, that's about it. I've never been on the ice.
Gentlemen, what kind of issues have you seen over the years with poor ice resurfacer drivers in regards to dashboards? Bob, Bruce, maybe you guys can tell our listeners what's the worst thing that you've ever seen a bad driver do to a set of dasher boards? Bob, you want to kick it off?
Sure. No, well, we certainly, there's 2 things that seem to happen all the time. I mean, certainly have seen, I forget if it was a rink out east, I believe, where they ran, it might have been some vandals came in and got the machine and ran it right through the end wall just for the heck of it. There's that type of thing. But beyond that, it's truly just the fact that it feels like some people don't realize there is a steering wheel on those things, and it's not the boards that are supposed to be guiding it, around the corners. And for real, the occasional touch and bump and grind is okay. Is you don't want to be running at 522 lineal feet on the boards, because the boards are never built to take those 7,000 pounds, and so we see all kinds of bent frames, and certainly on a regular basis we're repairing gates. And again, certainly we truly were thinking about sending you guys, have you on our annual Christmas list for thank yous for the machines you do build. The other thing we've often thought is, why is that guide wheel up at like 18 inches? Why don't we put that down by the floor where our boards are stronger? But then again, that may eliminate some of the damage and some of the sales. So I guess those are the things that we see.
Bruce, how about you?
Yeah, that's about it. I think the one picture was Cox Arena in Oklahoma, where one of the spectators jumped on the machine, fired it up, and then went right through the equipment gate, blew the bolts out of the floor, everything, and just laid it down. And it was kind of, when you leave your Zam, take your keys with you from now on.
It's funny. I was talking to a customer yesterday, and we're talking about different things. And I said, I've talked about writing a book about the things that have gone on in the rink world, but I said nobody would ever buy it because they would never believe that it's true.
Yeah.
I seem to recall when I was young, a long time ago, Mr. Hubbard's rink down in St. Mary's Point, that the machine got stolen, the Zamboni machine got stolen, and they took it down the road and ended up driving it down the embankment towards the river. And my dad getting a call saying, we need to get the machine back to the rink. And he's, where is it? And it got explained to him where it was. And it was like, how did that happen?
In the same Croy.
Yeah. Between that, and I think, Bob, the last time the rink master was used at Augsburg was it caught on fire, and it got drug out and put on the football field. And that was the last time I ever remember seeing that machine at Augsburg.
Is there still one in Anoka? That was the last sighting that I had a number of years ago, I thought.
They got rid of that and went to the dark side, or even darker side, with
okay.
the boys from Elmira. And,
okay.
And I don't know what happened to that. It's like there used to be a Tenant, I think, when Tenant was in the business, there was one of those up near Wadena somewhere in a pit. that Dale might know where that ended up, but it truly amazes me what has happened to some of these machines, let alone ours. Gentlemen, who would be your biggest sports hero, and have you met them? And if not, who would you most like to meet? And Bruce, we'll kick that off with you.
Obviously, Wayne Gretzky for me. And I did meet him. I scared him really bad. We were down in the old New Jersey rink, the one in Meadowlands. And for whatever reason, the team came in. He was in New York with New York. And he came in afterwards, drove in his personal vehicle. But there was a little alley that you had to come through. And in the Meadowlands, it's always kind of dark. There's a seedy sort of place in the back of the arena. And I come around the corner, and he just opens up the door and come in the arena. I also have a worker working with me who's about 6'7", 250 pounds. And both of us just run over him. We corner him in the corner. We go, Mr. Gretzky, it's so nice to meet you, and everything else like that. But the fear on his face when we got to him, like he was like, I'm in the wrong spot. I just got myself in a pile of trouble. That night at the game, he didn't play that night at the game. He stood off to the side, I stayed away from him. I wasn't bothering me. He had people around him and everything else like that. And then it was 2 nights later, he was up in Montreal, and I was standing at the Zamboni gate in Montreal, and he went by, and I just gave him a wave, and it was like, holy shit, this guy's following me now.
It was a Nancy Kerrigan moment.
Oh yeah,
I've got a stalker.
Yeah, he's got a wrench.
And he didn't have Semenko or McSorley to take on the boys in the corner.
Yeah, he was all alone.
And how about you, Bobby?
You know, about a little different twist on it. I guess probably what's sort of cool I thought was the most famous hockey people I have met was, of course, Herb Brooks used to come into Homestead ice rinks on a semi-regular basis. That was sort of cool. And of course, I met Bobby Clark out in Philly when I was doing the Spectrum back in '85. So those are a couple of memorable moments, if you will, even though I wasn't steeped in hockey as most of, you guys certainly are, but that was sort of cool. And if you will, the ones I would like to meet, really from the baseball side, Harmon Killebrew, which of course is not going to happen. But to me, that was my boyhood hero because I was all about baseball back growing up. So.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough. I had Herb Brooks at a hockey camp when I was a kid, and met him through my father through years. And he was an amazing man in that he remembered people. You could meet him one time and the guy would remember. I ran into him out at LAX one time, and he was standing at the counter. I go, Mr. Brooks, what are you doing here? And he goes, Doug, what are you doing here? And I was like stunned that he even remembered who I was. So what a great guy and what a great psychologist. Great. I think one of the greatest coaches of all time, but I'm somewhat biased, obviously, being from Minnesota. Right. And Bobby Clark, that's interesting, Bob, in that I had an experience with him down at a bar, shockingly, at an all-star event down in Tampa, which I've got a few other stories that I could share that Paula could share, but we won't go into those. I was kind of half expecting you to say Sid Hartman, the fabled the writer from the Star and Trib.
No, actually, speaking of Star and Trib, your boy Royce did come out and write an article on our St. Patrick ball team attending one of the games back in the day. But no, aside from that, I should say those guys are a little phony. Those writers, right? They just want to, kiss up to the talent. So.
No, you mean media is not guys. Real?
I mean, yeah, really, fake news.
You both had the experience, I believe. I know, Bob, you did for sure, and Bruce, I'm thinking that you did as well, of spending time with Bob Negley, the former owner of the Minnesota Wild. Mm-hmm. He was one of the finer gentlemen I've ever met in my career, and I'm just wondering if you guys can share what working for him and with him was like. Sure. Bruce, you want to take the lead, or Bob, either or? Jump in.
Yeah, so probably one of the nicest men I've ever met in my life. Genuine, honest, sincere, just he appreciated me. He appreciated the work I did, and told me all the time. Like, he'd go out of his way and phone me. Um, One of my best moments with him, it was the Canadian Thanksgiving weekend was coming up, and I was staying in Minnesota. We had lots of work going on. The shop was in Minnesota at the time, in Plymouth, and he phoned me up and said, "Well, you're not going home this Thanksgiving weekend. Why don't you fly your wife up, and we'll go to the opening game in Minnesota Wild, you, your wife, and my wife." And we got the owner's box all set up, and away we went and spent the afternoon with them and went to the game. And just just a true gentleman. He did so many things for me in my career. Um, just I couldn't say enough about the man. He was by far one of the nicest men I've ever met in my life.
Bob, how about you?
Yeah, mine experience is similar, but maybe a little different perspective. But the biggest thing, my takeaway was certainly for most of my career with Athletica, I was in the sales department, and in particular for a number of years with outside sales, right, for board systems. And I think really the biggest takeaway I had was two things. One is they truly were innovative marketers and would look at things differently or outside the box or just very creative when it came to market sales and marketing. And so it's no wonder that they've been successful in marketing the Minnesota Wild and promoting the team and hockey and everything. So there's that aspect is, I call myself a salesman, but I don't think near as creatively outside the box like they do, or look at things the way they do. So that was one, just sort of open your eyes to different ways of looking at things. And the other thing was also the connections they had. It was absolutely amazing. So if I'd be in against at a bid opening or at a potential presentation, and we're trying to land a job, it would be, well, okay, so we met with the chairman of the Hockey Association. Who else do we know within the group? What other connections do we have? And their ability, they were so far-reaching, these tentacles, and within the hockey community that invariably they had other connections to other people associated with this prospect and other ways to reach behind the scenes or up front and make connections and help with the success of the sale. So just the fact how integrated they were into the hockey environment, the community, and the connections they had was really amazing. And again, different ways to influence a sale, if you will.
Sure. Bruce, maybe you can start out and tell us how the dasher board world has evolved from the time that you first got involved into it to where it is now. From welding those plates to the ground that the machines would not be able to get moved, and just let our listeners know what you think are some of the biggest changes in the dasher board world.
Yeah, like I say, when I started, it was more of send the parts out and we put it together on site, and just like carpenters, and build a hockey rink and cut holes in plastic and put glass up. And it was a fairly simple process to do it. We were going into manufacturing at that time. We were, maybe a 12,000 square foot manufacturing company, and we were starting off in the aluminum dasher boards. We had a few sets out in the NHL. The R&D when I started into it was our seamless tempered glass system that first hit the waves in '95 and then went through the NHL. A lot of teams, especially the new buildings, Montreal Canadiens, Vancouver, Denver, they were all buying this new seamless glass. At that time, we shouldn't say over manufactured, but we overbuilt our systems. We didn't have the experience behind the aluminum to say what it was. In those days, we just used a 5356, which is a soft aluminum at the time, but we realized we were told it was the only aluminum we could bend. So we were doing products, so we made things really heavy, overbuilt them, and we weren't thinking about player safety. It wasn't something that was even being talked about back in those days. Then when that seamless system went out there, all of a sudden we started noticing there's more concussions, more shoulder injuries, things like that. It started becoming a subject. And from then we started looking at player safety and developing new systems and that. A lot of it came with the Montreal Canadiens. They were wanting something better. So they basically gave me an open house to their building to do any R&D I wanted in that building. I could do it at any time, just about, other than when the players' skates were on and things like that. But if there was open ice, it was my open ice if I wanted to go in there and do some R&D. So from there, then also our manufacturing, like today, from when we started in that 14,000 square foot building, there was probably 20 employees inside that building putting together dashboard systems. Today we have, say, 40,000 square feet of manufacturing. We will put in approximately 60 people, if not more. We have room for more, but we have 2 CNC machines. We have a robot, rolling machines, all the stuff we never had before. We used to get our material rolled from another company and we bring it in and cut it up, but everything was kind of just stick framed, stick built. And now there's all the jigs, the assembly, everything that goes into building that set of dashboards. It's a lot to it, but it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier process. But still, safety is still the number one concern. We're still working on products to prevent player injury. That's the key. That's the main thing, is what can we do to make the dashers a little bit safer? We see an incident where somebody gets hurt. What could we do to prevent that from happening again? So that's the biggest goal for us, really.
Bob, what have you seen change besides evolving from a set of dasher boards that my dad actually built for the
Bradley?
old little Ralph Engelstadt Arena, the original that UND played at, when he was doing them out of wood, working with a guy in a wood shop and putting Kydex facing on them. And then from your guys' involvement with Homestead with the steel frame, take us through all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is sort of amazing when you think back this evolution, because look, there's a couple things. One is how everything sort of comes full circle to some degree. When I got in the business, the first set of dashboards I was actually drawing blueprints on was for the Hartford Whalers, and it was a steel system that had 3/8 inch thick high density polyethylene on it. And I was like, today you'd never put 3/8 facing on a dashboard system and expect it to last. Because the players are bigger, the sticks are different, the pucks are different. It wouldn't work. But back then, that was for an NHL team. And really, when you go back, back in '79, there were 3 dasher companies that were pre-manufacturing systems, right? You had Homestead Ice Rink certainly building wood frame boards, 2x6 wood frame with plywood and poly face. You had the steel frame board system with plywood and poly. And then you had eventually then we had the fiberglass system that was designed and patented by Tippmann Engineering out of Fort Wayne. In the 70s, they had over 70 installations, including like 4 NHL rinks, actually. Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and Maryland, to name 3, actually played on those boards. And then Homestead bought Tippmann in 1980, 81 and brought it into Minneapolis. And then the other one is Safeway, right? Where you used to run into Safeway dasher boards, which to me was like the first factory prefabricated board system out there. I think they're made in Milwaukee, if I remember right. What was unique about them was they were 10-foot sections. We don't see a board system today made in 10-foot sections, but those are standard, including what the Lake Placid Olympics and stuff had played on back then in the 70s and 80s type deal. So the interesting part is everything was for the most part back then, wood or steel and the acrylic shielding. And back in the 80s, the biggest driver was, well, how can you build a system that's more maintenance free, if you will, or breaks less? So we start building these bigger, heavier steel frame structures, get rid of the supports on the back to make it easier for housekeeping and trip hazards, aesthetics, go to tempered glass because there's going to be less maintenance with it. And now, 6, 8, 10 years through that, and now there's different reactions, because now you're getting the stiffness, you're getting the injuries, you're getting the weight, you're getting, the inconvenience of replacing glass and this whole player safety thing. And so now you're going back full circle where rinks, now we're going back, of course, to Can we make a more flexible board system or lighter board system, or put a shielding system that's more player friendly? So that to me is sort of the amazing part. We're really coming almost full circle from where we were, 30 years ago, that type of thing.
Yeah, things have changed quite a bit, and you brought up Safeway. Weren't they the ones that built the dasher boards for the St. Paul Civic Center that were clear, that had
Thank
the
you.
acrylic facing to them?
That's exactly right. They had, if I remember right, it was a 3/4 inch acrylic face, but then it became a challenge to get 3/4 inch when they would break one, and then actually started putting on 5/8 Lexan on those boards. Exactly. And after they were taken out of the Civic Center, they had a second life down in Florida someplace. Actually, they were the ones. Yeah, they're sort of
Yeah,
boards of fame just because it's sort of notoriety of seeing a system like that.
it's if you go back to the old footage of state high school hockey tournament or the St. Paul Fighting Saints of the WHA, they
Hmm.
were clear boards, and there were stories about hockey players trying to determine whether they were distracted by some young ladies sitting in the front row of those.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if those are true stories or if they're not true stories. I never was
Yeah.
able. I'm never good enough to skate where I would have been playing to determine that fate.
To be determined yet, I guess.
Yeah. Bruce, could you maybe let our listeners know are some of the challenges that you're faced with in providing boards that range the full spectrum of a small community rink to that's used in the NHL?
I guess it's making sure the customer gets what he's really needs. Um, Sometimes it's hard to explain to somebody that some of the safety features we have are not mandated right today, but we know they're coming. So, example, soft cap and things like that. So, you're in that, you're talking to the customers, and they're not really quite sold on the safety part of the dasher board. So, as you're going along, trying to get them to buy into it, and some people are just firm that it's not necessary in their buildings, and some people are, yeah, it's give me everything you got and make it even better than that. But it's, I guess, the biggest challenge is trying to make sure that when we sell somebody a set of dasher boards, that 3 years from now, we're not going back and doing a big retrofit on them because we didn't educate the customer enough about what's coming down the pike. And there is a lot of changes, as we see in the OHL, AHL right now happening on. So it's that's probably the biggest challenge we'll have, is making sure. And then the quality, conversion building versus the community rink. Small community rink dasher boards will last a long time because they're not coming in and out. Whereas in the high-end buildings where they're coming in and out, that's probably when the dasher board's the weakest that it is. And making sure that they have the right system for their building, that they're not buying a set of dasher boards and then realizing 5 years later, 10 years later, that there's a whole bunch of work that needs to be done on these because they didn't get the system they were really needing, which would be more of a conversion rink. So those are kind of the challenges, just educating the customer. So,
Bob, could you maybe let the listeners know the variable dasher board systems that you guys have? Because you've got the Becker product line that was acquired by Athletica, the Athletica line, and then I believe Sport Systems. Is that also part of your guys' portfolio? So maybe the differences between the different sets of boards.
Yeah, absolutely. Without getting into all the minute details or minutia, is really, I guess it sort of boils down to at the top of the line, we certainly have what we're continue to call the Crystaplex brand products, which would be like the Crystaplex 6A, our flagship product that's used in all the conversion rinks, professional arenas, that type of thing. And so it's a welded 6-inch aluminum system and a whole long laundry list of bells and whistles and features you can apply to it, and in particular all the different safety features. Um, right up, if you will, right below that or next to that would be what was the Sports Systems flagship product, which was their Pro Series, which was a 5-inch aluminum system, but it was a mechanically fastened 5-inch aluminum system like curtain walls are on building structures. So that being a little more economical system, and something more for a more permanent installation. So you get those two aluminum systems and both of those being built up in Waterloo, Ontario. Then the next one, and I'm not saying necessarily in descending order, but next one on the list in terms of product line would be the flagship, if you will, for the Becker Group, which is the 6S steel system, right? A 6-inch wide welded steel system. There's certainly the hard, not the hardcore, but the followers of that just have the comfort level with the steel framework, the galvanized steel, more of a permanent installation. It's a 250-pound panel or 300-pound panel, and they're good durable products. So you got the 6-inch steel. And then below that, or in addition to that, also with across all three lines, which would be either the Athletica or the Becker or the Cascadia for that matter, there also are some lighter duty inline systems. The Infinity soccer system, our Infinity inline system, is a 3-inch frame and a 5-inch frame. So I think what it boils down to is we've got at least 3 different ice rink offerings, and then a number of different inline and soccer offerings below that. If I can take this one other direction back to that previous question you had with Bruce, is there's 2 challenges I see as, again, being out over the years selling dashboard systems. One is the biggest challenge is trying to identify really what the driver of this sale is going to be, or what the primary requirement is. And to that end is, you certainly have some customers who it's purely economical or economy based. What is the cheapest system I can get? That's what the decision is going to be all about. There's the other aspect that Bruce alluded to, which is safety. Everybody, for the most part, everybody's concerned with safety. No one wants anybody getting hurt in their facility. Having said that, there's a price tag with the safety. And many times what happens is people express interest in the safety products, that yes, they would like them, but as soon as they see the price tag, oh, well, that becomes a secondary consideration. But by the same token, there's certainly some situations where the hockey coach is carrying a lot of weight, or the owner, whatever, is carrying weight where, budgets are concerned, but we really are more concerned with safety. And then the other part is, of course, just the fact whether they're permanent or conversion, which one performs better. But just the challenge of trying to figure out, well, everybody will tell you all these things are important. What's the real driver? That it truly is one of the core challenges. The second thing is that, and I don't know if people realize this, but it's something I've come to realize over the years being on the inside. Obviously, there's a level of performance and expectation and specifications that we set forth as a company in terms of how our system should perform. And where I'm going with this is, let's take the polyethylene facing, for example. When we're in the office here, there are people knocking on our door wanting us to buy or make polyethylene for us. Let's say there's 10 different companies who can do it. Those companies also make polyethylene products for pontoons, or for boat docks, or for barrels, or for all kinds of different activities, skis for slides, and all kinds of things. And the issue is these extruders are bringing to you a product or a resin that is potentially might be what they can get the best buy on. They bought a truckload because they have to make 50,000 barrels, and oh, by the way, they're happy to make us some white sheets out of it, and oh, they'll give us a really good price. That's all great, but it may not have the right impact resistance at a cold temperature that we require, or may not have consistent gloss or consistent color. One of the easy ways to reduce polyethylene costs is to introduce regrind back into it. Your offcuts. Well, as soon as you do regrind, that affects the impact strength and your coloration and the consistency of it. So my point being, as a company, after being in this business for a long time, that's one of the things we pride ourselves on, is we truly have great products, and we aren't necessarily the cheapest spread. We'd like to be competitive, but my point being, we have all kinds of competitors who will listen to this guy knocking on the door and will buy that next cheaper thing, where we're going to be, no, you know what, we've got too much at stake here. We have our own set of